We are at the 8th and final part of our series on the Christian atheist, believing in God, but living as if God doesn't exist. Our journey has taken us through several stopping points. Our journey took us into knowing that God wants to have a relationship with us. It took us into the heart of God, knowing that God wants to love us and that God does indeed love us. It took us into realizing that God wants us to communicate with God frequently. It took us into the journey of being aware that when we're in pain and when we think things aren't fair, when disasters happen, that God walks alongside of us, giving us comfort in our pain. You know, that tough thing about forgiveness, we all know that we should, and it's difficult to do. But we learned about that difficult transformation and what we might do, at least to help us get started on the journey, realizing that forgiveness isn't easy, and talking with God about that and asking God to transform our lives. Then we talked about recognizing that everything is possible with God, even changing us, which is also difficult. We have to recognize that we have sometimes persistent problems in our lives that are difficult to deal with. And again, the place to start there is to acknowledge those and to ask for God's help, because anything is possible with God. Last week we talked about worry, believing in God but still worrying all the time. So our journey took us into overcoming our worry by learning how to recognize in life what is our responsibility and what we need to let God take care of beyond our responsibility, and leaving those things with God. Today, we're struggling with believing in God, but not always in the church. Again, I want to give credit to Craig Groeschel, founder and senior pastor of Life Church TV in Edmond, Oklahoma. He wrote the book, and I'm stealing heavily from his material. I have to be honest about that. That's what we've been. For those of you that have read the book, know that's what I'm doing. And I realize, in talking about believing in God but not in the church, I realize today I'm preaching to the choir. Okay? You're all here. Those of us who are here every Sunday generally don't have this issue. I believe in God but not in the church. But sometimes we really do wonder about the place of the church in our lives. Even as a pastor, I have to admit, is the church all it's supposed to be? You know, I wonder about believing in God, but not always in the church. People are shunning the institutional church in droves these days. Not only 18 to 25-year-olds, but people of all ages. And these are the excuses that they offer. And you probably have heard these from family and friends. And you probably have a whole lot more excuses that you've heard. So when I get to the end of my 7 that I've heard, I'm going to ask you to share. So let me give you a little bit of warning. Okay. The excuses that I've heard from folks about believing in God but not in the church. First one is, I don't have time for the church. You know, in our 24/7 world, Sunday is just another day. Well, stores and restaurants are open. Kids' sporting events are in full swing. For some, Sunday's even a work day. Right, Don? Yeah. Sometimes a work day. Sunday is the only day a number of us can sleep in or do chores. With so much going on, Sunday is not the same as it used to be, and church has become a lower priority, if it's a priority at all. I don't have time for the church. Maybe you've heard this one. The church is full of hypocrites. You ever heard that one? Church is full of hypocrites. Some people have plenty of time for the church. They just don't want to go. They just don't want to be with people that they think of as hypocrites. Who wants to hang out with a bunch of people who claim to believe in something, then live differently the rest of the week? You all know that the word hypocrite came from a Greek term of acting. In acting in the ancient world, generally all acting was done by males, and they had to play different characters. And the way they played different characters was with a mask. And the mask was the hypocrites, the hypocrite. So that person was putting on a mask. They weren't being, in outward appearance, who they really were. Okay? And people say that about the church. It's full of hypocrites. Okay. Number 3. These are not necessarily in any priority order, but this is always a big one. The church is always asking for money. Other people, they think they have time for church. They accept that people in general are hypocrites, so it would be okay to sit among hypocrites. They just can't stand the fact that the church is always asking for money, at least in their own mind. To them, it seems like the pastor's always begging for money, and they wonder how churches plan to use all that money to truly make a difference. The church is always asking for money. Sometimes that gets in the way. Okay. Number 4, I find the church to be irrelevant in my life. Even if these folks can get past all the 3 other issues that we've named, others have tried church and didn't feel it made a difference in their lives. So they say, why bother? Why bother to be involved in the church? Here are 3 more. Church people are too perfect. Maybe people want to attend church, but when they do, they feel even guiltier than they did before. The pastor and all the other put-together perfect people just make them feel worse about themselves. So they don't come. They don't come. Some people say, 6th, that the expectations of church people are too high. There are those super spiritual people in the church. We probably all know at least one. Super spiritual people who know exactly what the church should be like. And they have such high ideals that no church could possibly match up. They know exactly what's wrong with each church in town. And churches with mere mortals can't measure up. So why bother? The last one, and certainly not the least, but the last one that I thought of is, I'm a spiritual person, I believe in God, and I can find what I need elsewhere. There are so many resources out there on websites, in books, from podcasts, watching TV, listening to the radio. And who needs church anyway with all of these resources out there?